Today's webinar is on creating effective behavior plans, presented by Selena Rowanzon. Selena is a special educator for students with moderate to severe disabilities. She graduated from San Diego State University with a master's in special education and emphasis in autism. Selena is also a board-certified behavior analyst. She has worked with typically developing children and children with disabilities since 1996 as a paraprofessional, behavior tutor, classroom teacher, supervisor, consultant, and trainer. I now give you your presenter for today's webinar, Selena Rowanzon.
Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us. Today we have so much information that we are going to support you by actually offering a free behavior tip sheet, so you can help implement these strategies in your programs as soon as you get this handout. Today's objectives for this webinar are that you will be able to identify the ABCs of behavior, and you're going to identify these 3 behaviors and target how to learn to report observations. You will also learn to teach 3 skills that will replace these challenging behaviors. So as we start, we are going to start with a poll, and that is for you to click on one. Just want to see where you're at in your understanding of ABCs. So pick one. The ABCs of behavior are area behavior control, or antecedent behavior categories, or antecedent behavior consequence, or all behavior counts. What I'd like you to do is click on one of the 4 choices, and we will see where we are in our responses. We have 13 responses now. And let's see. Okay. People are filling in right now. Click, click, click. I see it. I love it in action. Keep going higher and higher. So please choose one of the items and the options. All right, looks like we have a majority of you are familiar with the ABCs of behavior, and that is right. It is antecedent behavior and consequences. Nice job. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. All right. So the ABCs of behavior. Every behavior has a communicative intent. Everything we do communicates something. Behavior is not negative or positive. It just is. We are behaving right now by sitting and participating in this webinar. We are behaving when we drive our cars. We are behaving when we may get a little frustrated with someone on the road because we haven't had our coffee. So it's not positive or negative. It's just behavior. It's just something we do. When we look at behavior, we always want to look at what happens before. And these are all the WH questions that we've learned in early elementary. What, when, where, who. We never want to ask why, because that is a very difficult question to answer. So we want to do this simple: when, where, and who. Of course, the behavior is what we actually see. So what are some examples of behavior? Well, it would be hitting, kicking, drop to the floor. Those are all observable and measurable. Things that are behaviors, but they are a group of specific behaviors would be throwing a fit, having an attitude, having a tantrum. I bet if I ask all the people that answered the question in our first poll, they would have a different definition of what a tantrum looked like or what throwing a fit looked like. You know, we could maybe have some similarities, but they're not necessarily observable and measurable. And a consequence is what happens directly after it. And a consequence is neither negative or positive. It just is. So what happened right after the behavior? And in applied behavior analysis, we know that consequence motivates the behavior. Motivates the behavior to occur again in the future, or motivates the behavior to not occur in the future. Okay. So So what do we know? We are communicating definitely. Am I tired? Am I frustrated? What we want to do is find out what that message is for the kids we're working with, and what is this child trying to communicate? Knowing that the child is communicating is really half your battle. So and sometimes they're never really angry or frustrated or upset at what you first anticipate. As we observe these behaviors, we want to ask ourselves, what can I learn from this? When is the behavior occurring? Is it the same time every day? Is it in the same activity? Who is involved? Does it always happen with the same person or the same staff member or the same children? And how does the child react when confronted? Do they act differently? Do they walk away? Do they ignore you? We always want to learn about the what, when, and how before we can decide on techniques to use. Now, this doesn't mean that we don't do anything until we understand why. A lot of times it's a puzzle, and we have to find the right pieces that go together to make a successful situation and accommodate kids that may have some more challenging behaviors than typically seen in our programs. So we want to make sure we're looking at what is the child communicating, what is really going on. Often we feel as if we should immediately know what to do when little angel screams and punches another child. And we have to, for safety's sake, respond safely. But later on, we need to reflect and look at what triggered that behavior. Did the other child call him a name? Did something happen earlier that day? Did something happen in the family situation at home earlier? So why is this behavior a problem? Why is punching a problem? Well, while we might always see punching as a problem, we might be annoyed by other behaviors that are not such a problem. So this is when we consider what are we going to target as a behavior? Which behavior are we going to target to replace and redirect? So it's picking your battles. So if he's saying, if it's a group lineup and everyone is transitioning outside and he's like, no, I don't want to, and yet he's grumbling. He's doing that grumbling with compliance, and he's kind of, but he ends up lining up with the rest of the kids. Is that a deal breaker? Is that something that we really want to focus on because he is compliant? He is following directions. He's voicing his opinion about not liking it, but he's actually complying. Not necessarily it's not as big of an issue as if he's punching or hitting other kids. So let's look at the observation forms that we have available. So these are ABC forms. So you're going to be tracking ABC behaviors, so antecedent, behavior, consequence. This should be written in a way that a person, like a staff member, your colleague, who is not present, who was not working that day, is able to understand and visualize in his or her mind what happened without being present. So that means it needs to be objective and measurable. So being objective is without putting assumptions in why the behavior occurred, and it has to be measurable. So he slapped so-and-so 2 times. That is observable and measurable. So you want to make sure that is very clear to understand. So let's look at 222 at 9:15 at the block area. Okay, Derek was lining up blocks in order by size and color. Judy grabbed a few to play with. That's the antecedent. So it happened in the block area with blocks with 2 kids. The behavior, Derek pushed Judy out of the block area and took back the blocks. The consequence to that was teacher put the blocks in timeout and redirected Derek to another area. Okay, so these are someone who was not present is able to observe this opportunity, this incident, and be able to understand it. what does a behavior support look like? As I described before, we have to make sure we know the target behavior. We cannot just track not following directions and aggression is kind of vague. So not following directions can have a lot of meanings behind it, and being aggressive can have a lot of meanings around it. So you have to have a target behavior that is clearly understandable to all of your supervisors, all of your colleagues, so that everyone knows what to look for. And you want to define what you want to see in the child doing instead of whatever that target behavior is. And one of the most important components of a behavior support plan is prevention. We want to have so many proactive strategies in place that we hardly ever have to do the consequence strategies. It's not enough to create a behavior support plan that says when Clark is aggressive towards other kids and is kicking, hitting, slapping, punching, then he is sent home. That's not a very good behavior support plan. What that is a reaction plan. What do we do to support him and accommodate him so that he does not hit, so that he does not kick? Do we need to create visual schedules? Do we need to create a token system to reward him for appropriate behaviors? Do we have to set up situations, opportunities in the classroom where there's places for him to take a break? Does he need extra gross motor activities? You know, always prevention, 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 proactive, proactive, proactive. And then you're going to want to implement and follow through. Trying it for one day is not enough. We have to continue. Change takes time, and change takes time, and change happens only when we are consistent across the board from all staff. So, what are the predictors of the behavior? What supports the child in repeating this behavior? What makes it happen over and over and over again? So this is looking at the antecedent. This is looking at your environment. What is occurring? What is happening? Do you have a runway in your classroom where kids can freely run in your program? Do you have areas that kind of are congested? You know, look at your environment. Look at some of the key materials that you use. Do the magnetic blocks cause issues between kids? Do people focus a lot? Do kids choose the computer a lot? Do you have a timer with your computer? Look at your environment. So, alternatives. Why is the behavior occurring? We can get to the why when we figure out what's going on with the setting events and the environment in your program. And what should the child do instead? What can we do as staff to teach and motivate these kids to make better and safe choices? And how can the child be motivated to change the behavior? So realize that motivation, we all work for motivation. We all work because we love working with kids, and we get a paycheck. That is a motivation. So what is this child's paycheck for changing their behavior? They're getting, in some ways, a paycheck for hitting or being aggressive or some sort of other maladaptive behavior. So what can we do that's more motivating than that? And sometimes that means a reinforcement inventory, finding out what are some really fun things that the kid likes, whether it's food, activities, people. There's all sorts of things you can find out from families to find out what is motivating to that child. And then integrate it if it works well in your program. You know, it could be simply that he likes to have one-on-one reading with staff. How can we make that happen? Okay. And reactive strategies. So what will be done if the problem behavior occurs? Now I want to remind you that this is after you've gone through all of your proactive strategies and you don't give up. If the child is testing this new formula of support and acts out different ways because in response to your supportive strategies, you keep going. You have more patience than that child. And this is what learning is. We help develop an environment and strategies and supports in place for this child to really realize, oh, you know what, this is a safe environment. I can make good choices, and I'm okay here. You know? When the child acts out in ways that we do not agree with, we can prompt and redirect a child to replacement behavior. And redirection does not mean no thank you. It does not mean no thank you. Actually, no thank you is something you say at the dinner table. It's not something we say when a child is aggressive or makes an unsafe choice. Prompting and redirecting, oh, did you want to share the toys? Are you mad? We put words in their mouths. Are you upset? Can I help you? So that is some of the redirection and the prompting. If the child is not able to calm him or herself down, then we may have to redirect them to another area. Take a break. Let's sit down. Let's practice our breathing. Let's practice our choo-choo breath. Let's practice our blowing up a balloon breath. And limited feedback if necessary. Sometimes kids don't benefit so much with a lot of verbal prompting. So consequences should match with behavior. This little comic here is interesting. You know, the principal suspended me. School is the only place in the world when you can get time off for bad behavior. So if you have ever sent a child home because of bad behavior, have you ever thought if that child is going to go home and play Wii for the rest of the afternoon, or the child doesn't have extra daycare, and so the child goes back to mom or dad's office and get some special treats in the staff lounge because all the adults are really happy to see this little guy or little girl hanging out with mom or dad at the office. So the consequence is not really meaningful, and it actually just creates agitation for all involved. The teachers get a break because the child is no longer in their program for the day, but the problem actually has not been resolved. What I like to do in my classroom settings is have toy timeout. So if kids are aggressive or frustrated around toys, then they get to have a break. That goes on a timeout. So you always want to make sure you're giving choices and being consistent. So that means no staff shopping. So if one person makes a boundary and sets a clear routine and a clear boundary, then all the staff follow through. For clarification, you always can have the child repeat the direction at whatever level they're able to communicate, whatever level they are. You don't have to demand eye contact, but you say, okay, you can do the call-out game. When I say SpongeBob, you say pants. SpongeBob, pants. So that means that they're cueing in to you doing a shout-out, and they understand you. So it doesn't mean repeat everything I say. It just means just checking for comprehension. And you can also use the if-then. If you don't clean up the blocks, then the block area will be closed. Or when you put the blocks away, then it's time to go outside. So if, then, and kind of being a broken record about that, around those sayings help because kids, there's no negotiating when you say if, then, or when, then. Basically you're saying this is what's going to happen, and this and this are two things. So there's no negotiating at that time. If you do need to redirect, have some discipline in place. Don't do it across the room. Do it right in the area of the child. That way, so it's a personal invitation to change your behavior. That way, if you find yourself kind of shouting across the room, there might be something going on with the entire room dynamic that's bringing that out. And you want to focus on the positive. Like I said, reactive strategies Our last resort, focus on positive. So how do we modify the room to better support the kids? How do we do the child arrangement? How do we create visual supports in the program? How do we have simple consequences in place to just change the behavior? We always want to focus on the positive. And that means being very specific about what you like. Thank you. I love how Krista and Tori are cleaning up the housekeeping. Wow, look at Jacob and Jared. Thank you. Wow, they're lining up, ready to go. Awesome. So it's very specific praise. So you always want to have an open line of communication between your staff and your colleagues, and so that you all can be on the same team, so there isn't that staff shopping I talked about before. So communicating clear expectations. Are your rules and expectations posted? Do they have pictures of the kids performing the behaviors appropriately? Do you have pictures of the kids with their hands to self? Do you have kids sitting with their legs crisscross applesauce, hands in lap? Do you have kids eating, eating with their at the table? Do you have visual representations of what you want to see? And communicating with parents is very important. And understanding that a lot of changes can take place that you may not be aware of. Did mom or dad deploy? Was there some family dynamics at home that created a little tension, that the child is coming to school a little sleepless? So think about those changes, and think about maybe the floaters that come in your room that might create a little little agitation. I walked into an infant room, so it was 1-year-olds and under, and the teacher immediately saw me come in and she said, "Walk softly, talk softly." Because the kids were really sensitive to strangers coming in the room, and sometimes they would just all start crying because of just a simple change of a stranger coming in the room. And she said, stay by the door for a few minutes and then slowly walk in. And that was an amazing strategy that she did to support all of the kids in her program, because she knew they needed to know that they were safe. And it was amazing. And I said, thank you for telling me that. Thank you for sharing that with me, because I love seeing accommodations working. So, in review, I'd like you to consider your environment and what can be making the behavior occur. I want you to remember that there's no such thing as it came out of nowhere. He does it for no reason. That I've tried. I've taken ABC data and I can't find a pattern. It just means we're looking in the wrong space. We're looking at the wrong thing. So maybe taking a step back, asking someone else to come in and say, can you help me look at this? Because there's always a reason why we behave. Everything we do has a reason. And what can we do to prevent that behavior? How do we create a plan that includes how to replace the behavior, and that includes strategies to prevent it? And how do you encourage the behavior change? So I have one more poll that I'd like to ask you. Collecting ABC data is so complex that only someone with an advanced degree should try it. Is that true or false? Yes or no? You participants are amazing. Thank you. We keep getting all the results in. And so no, collecting ABCA data is not too complex. It's actually it's easy, because we're just tracking what we see. We're not tracking what we feel. We're not tracking what we think. We are just tracking what is right in front of us. What was the antecedent? What happened? Where did it happen? Who did it happen with? What time of day? And then what actually was that behavior? And then what was the consequence? And it's okay. Sometimes the consequence can be the teacher ignored. That's a consequence. Or we didn't know what to do, so we didn't do anything. That's a consequence. So we might need to look at that and see what we can do differently in the future. I really appreciate 100% accuracy on this poll. I love it. It shows learning in action, and that you are cementing your foundation of behavior support strategies and creating a behavior plan in the future. Now I'm going to go to the next slide, and I want to remind you that in your post follow-up email, we will be giving you one of amazing creations of Kits Included Together. Kits Included Together. We have an awesome tip sheet that we're going to provide to you for free. It's an amazing resource that you and your staff can create behavior support plans in your programs using the webinar you saw today and this follow-up tip sheet. So I'm going to pass it along to Emily, and I thank you so much for your participation, and we'll take some questions.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. Like Selena said, if you have any questions, please type them into the chat box on the left-hand side of your screen, and we will answer as many as we have with the time that we have left. And any that we don't get to right now, we will answer in a follow-up email later today. The recording link to this webinar, the handout of slides, and a certificate of participation will be sent as links to you in a follow-up email. So don't worry if you missed part of the webinar or you want to listen to the webinar again. You'll be able to access that later on today. And please fill out our survey if you have some time. Please join us next time for our webinar, Advocating for a Child with Special Needs by special guest presenter and KIT Inclusion Specialist Delpha on July 10th at 10 a.m. Pacific Time. And we also have plenty of resources to offer you. We have our online learning center, which you can create a free account and continue to earn CEUs. We have plenty of courses, instructional videos, and more resources for you. We also have a really awesome smartphone app that you can download free on your Android or iPhone. We also have free monthly community trainings. We're taking a little hiatus this summer, but we'll return in the fall, and we'll make sure to let you all know about that. And as we expand, we have a new affiliate program. So if you know any programs that would be interested in inclusion training with KIT, please let them know to check out the affiliate program on our website. And of course, keep in touch with us on our social media channels. We have Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest. We'd love to continue the conversation and share thoughts and comments there. So thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time on July 10th. Bye all.